Should Orange County legalize pot? Some cities give a resounding no, while Santa Ana struggles to regulate medical marijuana. UCI students join the national campus protests, but are their grievances real or imagined? We discuss and debate next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. Cities are trying to cope with pot. UCI is trying to cope with student protesters. Let's tackle those stories and more. Joining me, lawyer and former Irvine councilman Chris Mears, development director of the conservative think tank, the California Policy Center, and former executive director of the Lincoln Club, Clare Venegas, and retired Orange County Superior Court judge and the 2012 vice presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party, Jim Gray. Boy, long introductions for you folks. Welcome.
Not long enough. Not long enough.
Well, Judge, we mentioned that you were the last vice presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party. You're also doing some work for the lead up to these presidential debates that presumably we're going to see. What are you doing?
Rick, it's probably the most exciting thing in my lifetime, other than the birth or adoption of my children. We have brought a lawsuit, we being the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, as well as the candidates, against the Republicans and Democrats and Commission on Presidential Debates to require them to change the format to back what it used to be when the League of Women Voters ran it, which was any political party that's on enough ballots technically to win the presidency should have a seat at the table. And when the League of Women Voters was frozen out, they left with the public statement, we will not be a part of the hoodwinking of America. If the Libertarians and Greens could have a seat at the table, it will force the candidates from the Republican and Democratic Party to address issues they do not want to address. I think it's the most exciting thing that we can contribute to the political realm of our country.
What are the chances of you being able to prevail in court?
They're pretty good. We're bringing an antitrust claim against them. We have a duopoly there that the commission is completely made up of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. They say we're bipartisan, not nonpartisan, just bipartisan. We are there to exclude other voices and promote ourselves. I think it really is a logical monopoly case. We also have First Amendment issues. We have a good candidate, a good attorney in D.C. I think it's going to prevail. I think we have a good, solid chance.
Do you think the public's with you? Because, I mean, you know, the Libertarian gets 1% of the vote. These other parties get less than 1% of the vote. You know, don't people just want to see the folks that are actually in the hunt to be president?
Yes. The political polls now show that more than 50% of the high-propensity voters are fed up with the two-party system, and they want third-party voices. That doesn't mean they'll vote for us. Even in Orange County, I have big-time Democrats, big-time Republicans saying, Jim, I like you. I wouldn't probably vote for you, but you should have a seat at the table. It's the American way. I believe strongly that a majority of the voters would like to have third-party voices there.
Well, and part of the problem, Rick, it's sort of a circular argument. I think you raise a good point, and a lot of people might share that point of view. But as long as we continue to exclude Libertarian Party candidates and Green Party candidates from the debate, then they will continue to be marginalized.
And
if we're going, I'm sorry, go ahead, Claire.
I was just going to say, and here in California, we have now a top 2 election system where we're not even considering candidates of other parties at the ballot box, and that's definitely an injustice, and I think it does a disservice for voters.
So you like it because it identifies parties, different types of parties,
right? And I think too that you know, it's a competition for ideas on some level,
it is,
and
exactly.
it does raise issues by opening and broadening, I think, the scope of candidates.
Had we been in the debates in 2012, we would have forced the Romneys and Obamas of this world to discuss Obamacare, for example. They didn't want to, they didn't, for somewhat obvious reasons. And that doesn't mean that we'll get elected, but it does mean we will force them to discuss other issues. The voters will win. It's big time stuff.
Okay, and so here, I didn't set it up on purpose, but we've got a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian, and all three of you agree on that.
Most people will.
It's a perfect.
Well,
match.
let's see if you all agree on our next topic, which is marijuana. The debate over legalization of pot continues to rage across the country, and in Orange County, the battle's being fought city by city. Newport Beach is the latest of several cities to ban medical marijuana. Costa Mesa wants voters to decide the issue. And Santa Ana, which held a lottery to allow 20 medical marijuana dispensaries, is being driven crazy trying to shut down one dispensary that did not win the lottery. So, Judge, should these cities be easing up or cracking down?
Well, actually, I think that it should be up to each city. If that's what they want to do, I think they're foolish not to allow regulated and controlled marijuana. It's going to be here anyway, clearly. In fact, marijuana is the largest cash crop in the state of California today. Number 2 is grapes, by the way. So somebody's using it. So there's a lot of tax revenue. Colorado is a success story. They brought in lots of money. They've regulated, controlled, and I think that other states
How
and
do we
cities
know
should.
that marijuana is the largest cash crop? That's interesting.
Just ask me. I just told you.
I take issue with the fact that the statement that Colorado is a success story. I mean, and especially as a parent, you know, when you see in Colorado schools are the expulsion rate for drug-related incidences in schools is skyrocketing. You go to Denver and you trip over homeless people. I mean, homeless.
It's the mile-high city.
Yeah, exactly, literally now. And as a parent, I do have concerns about the safety of our children and having a substance that is that they would be more exposed to.
Well, let me talk about this from a more personal point of view. The subject of medical marijuana, the broader subject of legalization of marijuana is hopefully a subject for another episode of the show. 5 months ago, my son-in-law was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and he's in hospice care at home now with my daughter Sophie and their 5-month-old son Hank. Kirk was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer a week before his son was born. He's really putting up a tremendous fight and has been all along, but about 6 weeks ago or so, he really was in a dark place. And my daughter, for the first time, decided to look into medical marijuana and get medical marijuana for him. I can't tell you what a transformation there has been in Kirk. He laughed for the first time in months. His mood has been lightened. He's not stoned. That's not how much medical marijuana works. But it has brought such a level of lightness to the entire situation. And of course, it doesn't just affect Kirk. It affects the entire family because now we're able to see him in a lighter state of mind. So when I see local politicians in particular make cheap politics over this issue, I would encourage them to think more personally about this issue. And to engage their more empathic nature and to consider those people, such as my son-in-law, who's undergoing and experiencing this kind of disease, and also remember their own experience or experiences that if they live long enough, they're going to have.
Yeah. Well, Claire, do you have an objection to medical marijuana for people that need it?
No, I think the issue here is, are you going to have an ad hoc system of regulating whether it is medical marijuana or potentially the legalization of marijuana and how that actually happens, at a local level? It is a hodgepodge to go from one city that is cracking down and banning medical marijuana or eventually potentially legalize marijuana and going in another city that isn't.
We're going to have an initiative on the ballot in 2016 for regulation and control of recreational marijuana. I insist that there be no advertising in this where young people could see it. I mean, that's really important to me. But just because we condone the use of alcohol or cigarettes does not mean we condone those alcohol and drugs. And it'll be the same thing here, where it's going to pass if we do our job anyway well whatsoever, and it will all look back and see that this was a good thing.
Well, I think the jury's still out.
Well, the crux of the issue, doesn't it come down to is the with legalization, and I'm not talking about medical marijuana, because you see the problems when you try to regulate it in this restrictive way. These clinics. Let's face it, people know that there's, or assume that some of that marijuana is not going to people that need it.
You mean some people take advantage of the system?
Yes, they take advantage of the system. But and that's why, of course, Judge, you have taken that libertarian view. We should just legalize it. It would get rid of the organized crime aspect and all that. But then there are the other people who say, hey, it's a gateway drug and it's related to crime, and do we really want to encourage that type of thing?
It's a gateway drug only for one reason. Today, if people are going to buy illegal marijuana, they have to associate with gangsters who will want them to get involved more with cocaine and the rest. And think of the drug money. Look at what we have done with drug money in Mexico, with all of the beheadings and all of the corruption and everything. It has nothing to do with drugs, Rick. It has everything to do with drug money.
Well,
and it's the same thing here. We are pushing children into juvenile street gangs to be a part of the action.
There is a compelling
that is a huge
argument
problem.
on a national scale, and you can prove every which way from Sunday that the war on drugs has not been a success.
It just doesn't work.
I do agree that we have to look at it. I'm not convinced that the cost is going to be worth the ultimate cost in terms of potentially, higher crime rates and impacts on children. I don't know that that is a cost that I'm willing to necessarily.
Let me add one thing, because when we finally came to our senses and repealed alcohol prohibition, homicides went down 40% the next year and continued to go down. The same thing will happen here. Let me quickly say, with regard to Chris Mears and his son-in-law, that being a sitting judge that's spoken against our nation's drug policy since 1992, I hear all kinds of stories like this, and it tears your heart out. Let's allow people to use what drugs they feel would help themselves, and hold people accountable for their actions, but not what they put into their bodies. Criminal justice system's really good at that, but otherwise let an adult choose what to put in his or her body.
Hear, hear.
Okay.
More agreement, Rick.
Well, you all came around to a consensus, a very forward-looking attitude. I love you guys. You're really good. All right, so keep going. Let's see how we do on this one.
We're not going to do as
the
well.
The wave of campus protests that started at the University of Missouri and swept across the country has found its way to Orange County, too. At UC Irvine, students protested against racial insensitivity and for free tuition. The university's Black Student Union wants a separate dorm for incoming black students. Chris, I got to tell you, hear that, I think separate but equal. Should we have separate water fountains, too? Help me with this.
Well, no, we've already been through a history that had separate water fountains, as a matter of fact, Rick.
And that was my point.
That didn't work out so well.
No, and so now we're going to have separate housing.
What I want you to, what I want to encourage you to do, and other panelists who might share your sentiments, is for a moment, instead of connecting so quickly with your own judgment of this issue and judgment of the students who have made the requests and the demands that they have, is first of all ask, why is it that so many black young people throughout the United States feel a need for this kind of treatment, feel a need for their own communities being formed on campuses? I spoke to Thomas Parham last night. He's one of my closest friends. He's the vice chancellor at UCI, who's been directly involved in responding to the students' demands. First of all, to allay your concerns, there's no danger or risk of a separate black dormitory. It would violate, I think it's Prop 209. It would be unlawful to do such a thing.
But the Black Student Union has requested that.
Well, what the university is going to do is they're going to provide a black floor in one of the dormitories that exists. But why is it that students, answer the question, Rick, you answer the question. Right. Why is it, do you think, that black students at UCI and elsewhere throughout the United States feel a need for this kind of experience?
Well, my answer would be, it's not just the black students. It's many students, and it's not like all black students, but there's black students and white students who are protesting. I would say because they have bought into a victimization culture, which is why they perceive themselves to be victims.
You're just judging.
And they perceive every slight.
You're part of the problem in that thinking.
Okay, well, Judge, your thoughts.
It's two issues. It's innate in human beings to want to discriminate against people that are not like me, and I understand that. And we have a long way to go still in our society and in every society. When I get our census, I don't even put in that information. I want to be a race-free society in effect, and I don't even put in that I'm whatever I am. And I hope that other people can live the same way. We have to make progress, but we've made huge progress. And progress is not desensitizing people where, you might hurt my feelings, which is where we're going with this movement, which I think is silly.
That's such a fallacious assumption.
Chris, it's not. I do not want to have floors in dormitories set aside for Japanese or Samoans or blacks or anyone else. We are an integrated society, and you're going to have to get on with it. If you want to study black studies, which is fine if you want to read a couple of books, it's not going to help you earn a living. You know, you're going to end up owning all of these debts for school, and I majored in black studies and now I can't get a job, will just make you unhappier. We've got to get real in our society. Last comment on this, any of us can go walk down the street and understand that maybe we could get bumped by somebody walking. It's unnecessary, it's negligent and the rest, but there's no cause of action for it. It's the same thing in society. Maybe sometimes people will say something that will hurt your feelings. Get over it. Let's try to sensitize ourselves, but it's also real life. Let's school our children to face life instead of this anonymous hurt feelings stuff.
Claire, do you think we're doing, what do you think? Have we coddled these millennials too much, or what's going on here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is. It's almost like it's back to the future. I mean, we're starting to go back, and it's not progressive, it's regressive. To think that suddenly it makes sense now for students or any student group of any ethnicity to self-segregate and say, well, this is because it's, I need to have a safe zone, or I need to. There are legitimate, I agree, legitimate concerns about injustice, but to lump this all together in a call for free tuition, higher minimum wage. I mean, what are we really after here? I think that's where you see, okay, is this really a true cry out for injustice, or is this simply a way for the liberal agenda to then be executed among, to be implemented among student groups? I mean,
we're missing an opportunity here, and I'm sorry that my friend Judge Gray has the point of view that he has on some of these issues. This is a very, very profound issue underneath the surface expression of it as it relates to UCI and other campuses throughout the United States. The part of the fundamental problem here, of course, here on this panel, we don't have any African Americans speaking to this issue. I don't claim to be able to speak for African Americans. My wife is African American. My in-laws are African American. I sing in a black gospel choir. Most of my best friends are black. And what I still understand, what I still realize more than ever at this point in time, is how much I don't understand, how lacking my own point of view is, how difficult it is for me, even with my experience, to be able to step into the shoes of African American people and understand what a different experience they have in life. These young people have a different experience by reason of their color. As adults, they will have a different experience. We are far worse off today than we were 50 years ago in the heart of the Civil War. By every measurable, don't look at me like that. By every measurable, African American people in this country are worse off today. That we don't have enough time to talk about it, but by every measurable, whether high school dropout rates, unemployment among young people, the number of black men under the control of the criminal justice system, on and on and on and on. By every measurable, black Americans are worse off today than they were 50 years ago. So when I hear those say that, what are they complaining about? What is this preferential treatment they want? Step into the shoes to the best you can, into the shoes of an African American person, and you'll have better insight into exactly why they want what they want in this case.
I'm really sympathetic with what you said, and I'm doing the best I can to change the criminal justice system. The incarceration of people of color, blacks mostly, is abominable, not what we stand for. The education as well, but there are better ways of doing this than having separate floors so that they can sit there together.
By your judgment, ask why is it that we have to decide this?
No, this is
because we are the government together. Everybody should come into the government and work for all of us. That's what we should do. With regard to schools, it's clear that we have too many schools failing our children, and the repercussions of that are enormous. So there are better ways. Allow the parents to decide where and how their children should be educated by letting them choose where their government money is going to be spent for their schooling. They will demand excellence. They will receive excellence. But that's not a racial thing. That's an economic thing. This is not racial. It's economic.
Well, I think some of what you've just articulated is part of the problem, Judge Gray. It should not be up, in many instances, should not be up to non-African American, mostly men and women, to be the deciders with these kinds of issues.
But it's not white. You see, you're putting it in terms of we and them. How about us? How about us as a society making these decisions? And I think that's the problem with what's going on campus right now, is that it's identity politics. No, it's identity politics. Because no longer does these students, it doesn't seem to me they're going to a university to do what you're supposed to do. You look for universal truths. You look for principles to guide one's life, and the whole purpose of university is the intellectual environment where it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, you're here. And here, it's like we need our own space, and it's all identity politics. You just suggested that we can't weigh in on this because we're not African American.
Of course you can weigh in, but too many white people just want to kind of dust their hands off.
It's a fair discussion for us to have, because it's the administration of that university that is going to have to determine whether they agree with those students' demands, right?
And the administration does agree with the actual demands as they exist. With many of them, they agree with it. I think there's going to be something publicly said about this in the coming days.
Cannot accept the fact that we can say that minorities, African Americans, any other minority in this country is worse off than they were 50 years ago. I just cannot accept that.
Well, then your heads are in the sand about it. Yeah. Your heads are in the sand about it.
Well, we already made the distinction. There are some issues clearly that on economics, on incarceration, on education, and it divides in a lot of ways on economic areas. We've got to get together. But I will dispute, Chris, and you're a good man and we're friends, but I will dispute that I cannot be a part of the resolution of these areas for everybody, be it from Samoa or children or women or anyone else. We can identify and work together. And I do not want people racist to gather together and say, you don't understand me. Because when it comes down to it, we're all human beings. We have different experiences, but we can all work together for the benefit of us all.
If you want greater insight into these issues, Judge, go and talk to a black person. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to Rick. Don't talk to
but in a way, Chris did raise some points. Chris raised some points about the economics and the social circumstances, which I don't think it's cut and dried. For instance, the children born out of wedlock. Much more in the black community, the African American community now, as well as the white community, but certainly in the African American community than 50 years ago. But is that a result of racism?
It's absolutely the result of institutional racism.
I'm saying that is it possible that people's attitudes have become less racist, but we're encountering economic problems that we have to deal with?
Well, I don't see the evidence of that. What I do see on the very issue you talked about, one of the important reasons why there are so many black fathers who are not in the home is because they're in prison and or they're underemployed and or they're disproportionately affected by the use of drugs and poverty and the rest of it.
Yet advocating for a higher minimum wage is going to shut out exactly the same jobs that could be the first step towards a career, towards an economically beneficial life. I mean, that's another policy debate that I think is being mixed up with this whole movement. It's not just we want free tuition; it's also that we want to increase minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Chris, do you think there's a lack of goodwill on the part of white folks?
I can't speak for all white people, but I think what there is, there is an unwillingness and an inability for many white people to try to step into the shoes of an African American person, to try and better understand the experience of African American people that produces this kind of thinking that leads to the desire for these kinds of things
you're
in our
right,
universities.
But then it's the same thing for black people to go into the shoes of Hispanics or whites or otherwise. It's nature. It's what happens to human beings, but segregating them so they can all bemoan the fact that we're victims is not going to help.
These are false equivalencies when you lump discrimination against other ethnic and racial groups with the discrimination against African Americans. The experience of African American people in this country historically and today is unique and distinct and very different.
That's true.
Very different.
That's true. Let me
bring it back home to UCI, where we started here. Your friend Thomas Parham, Vice Chancellor, African American.
Yes.
Michael Drake, the recently departed for Ohio State Chancellor of UCI, African American.
Yes.
And yet you have these contentions that there is this racial insensitivity on the campus of UCI. Really?
Well, as a matter of fact, there are some important examples of racial insensitivity on the campus of UCI. But first of all, I think what you need to consider is just the day-to-day experience of African American people as they move through life and what they experience. But to your point specifically about UCI, it's all been within the last couple of years where there was a white fraternity, largely white fraternity on campus that did a skit in blackface.
And it's deplorable.
I'm responding to what you just said. Of course it's deplorable. But those are just the things that all of us are able to recognize. That doesn't permit, the whole issue should not be defined by that. What my experience has taught me, having been intimately involved and acquainted with African American people, is how much I don't understand, how much I don't and am unable to appreciate as being a member of the dominant race and as also being a male member of the dominant race. We, Jim, as white men in this society, have been benefiting by affirmative action from birth. But it is one of the most lamentable components of that experience is that it makes it so difficult for us to step into the shoes of someone of a different race.
Okay, well, Claire, I hope you weren't offended by the males on this panel.
I think
later,
I need to be in a
okay.
safe zone right now.
Okay, all right, well, that's it for now. And thanks to my guests, Chris Mears, Clare Venegas, and Judge Jim Gray. You can watch this show at pbssocal.org or go to rickreiff.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.